Welcome back to this video series where I walk you through how you can use Sudowrite from start to finish to create your next book. Today we're going to be looking at outlining, which is a crucial and possibly the most important step on this entire process. Let's get into it. All right, so in the last couple of videos, we've done a little bit of work. We talked about the brain dump. We talked about genre and style. We created our synopsis. We created some characters, and now we have the outline. And the outlining is one of the most important fields. For one, it is one of the only required fields that you have to have in order to create the prose. Without anything in your outline area, you can't really create the prose. And that's important to understand. There are several ways to create your outline. So if we just say generate novel outline here, it'll start giving us something to work with. All right, and now it has generated the entire outline. It took 800 words, and this will come out of your word allotment if you have that. But so far it gave me 20 chapters. However, I noticed as it was writing that everything from about in this Act 5 here at the end was not in my synopsis. It just kind of tacked that on to the end, which is a very common behavior with AI. It tends to want to keep going. And I end this story on a bit of a cliffhanger, and AI doesn't like cliffhangers. It likes to really just tie things up into nice little bows. And so I could just delete this entire thing. And so I really have 16 usable chapters from the synopsis that I gave it. Now, if I were being completely honest, if I were doing this, I would probably start with this, and then I would just add a lot of my own stuff. And for one, I know the 16 chapters is not nearly enough to write this particular book. It's going to need to be at least double that. And so I would just go through and probably add a couple of extra chapters. I'd say, okay, well, maybe this can be split into 2 chapters and, add more information there. And I like having a really tight control over the stories that I'm writing in the outlining phase. This is the phase where I tend to do the most of my own actual writing, really plotting out the story and showing what I want it to look like. But since we are talking AI, I'm going to try and give you a few strategies to make this even better than what it is. This isn't bad, but it's certainly only a starting place, and I really encourage you to go in and make these chapter summaries your own and before just using them, because the more generic that they are, the worse your final prose is going to be. You want to get as specific as possible in these chapter summaries, while bearing in mind that this is just a chapter summary. Like, we don't need to go into huge depth. You only have 1,700 words in this space, and it's already using up 700. And I know that I'm going to have to at least double the number of chapters here, which means that I need to keep them, like, each chapter here should be no longer than what you see here in terms of the number of words per chapter. And so you want to keep it to that. There will be plenty of room when we get later down to talking about beats. There will be plenty of room to flesh out the chapter there to give the specifics. But really you want to get to the crux of what happens in each chapter. And so let's look at some other things related to this section. So starting off, and this is a relatively new feature, Sudowrite now has this ability to do several different types of outlines. There's only a couple here. There's the hero's journey, there's Hollywood beats, there's the story circle, and which are all kind of similar to each other. Hollywood beats is actually just an example of Save the Cat. I think they might be using the term Hollywood beats maybe for copyright or trademark issues with the term Save the Cat, but I'm pretty sure that's what that means. And then story circle, it's a very similar structure to the hero's journey. And then a romance outline, because romance authors use Sudowrite a lot and make up quite a lot of the number of books out there. And so having a good romance specific genre or outline is a good idea. So I'm going to select, just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to select Hollywood Beats so you can see what that looks like. But you can also experiment with all of these others and see which ones you like most. And so I'm going to generate this again using the Hollywood Beats and see what it gives me. All right, so it has given me 15 different chapters. And again, I'm assuming that's based on the number of story beats in the Save the Cat framework. These aren't too bad, but again, you're going to want to look these through very carefully, because sometimes, based on what your synopsis said, you're really going to have trouble getting everything perfect in one generation. You're really going to have to go in there and do it yourself. For instance, I was looking at these first 3 chapters, and I know for certain that I want the action to get started really quickly in this book. And so I know that these 3 chapters that it has here, I'm really going to lump into just one. I really want all that action to happen in one chapter. And yet, like I said, this is going to need to be at least 30 chapters for the entire thing to do it properly. And so there are other areas in this outline where that chapter should be split into more chapters. For instance, this chapter 10, it says Artegal is enchanted and forced to undergo a series of justice and mercy puzzles that are reminiscent of some of the actual examples of justice in the Fairy Queen poem. It's drawing that specifically from my outline, and because I was kind of glossed over that and was vague about it in the synopsis, it has made it vague in the outline. This is a good example of where this chapter could probably be broken up into 4 or 5 chapters. We don't know. And so, again, this is why I encourage you to really have an understanding of what makes a good chapter structure and figure that out, because you're going to need to be either merging or splitting a lot of these chapters before they are ready to write. But it is nice that you get all of these different story beats here. So what else can we do? One of the things that I actually recommend the most, and, you know, as much as I love Sudowrite's outlining features, and you can rewrite these to give it feedback, you say, no, do it this way, do it that way, that will just eat up more of your words. And so really, I feel like the best way to go about this is to create your own outline in another program like Claude or ChatGPT, and then you bring it in here and let it flesh it out from there. If you do it that way, any of the words that you copy and paste from an external source into Sudowrite will not count against your word count. So you don't have to worry about it using up your words if you're generating those words somewhere else. So while this is nice to get started, it's really not sufficient in my opinion. And honestly, probably it would be very hard to get it to be exactly what you need it to be. In my opinion, I feel like the outline is the area where you need to provide the most amount of human input in this entire process from start to finish. So let's just briefly open ChatGPT so I can give you a sense of what this looks like. And I have a prompt here that we're going to use, this prompt right here. Using the following synopsis, I'd like you to write an outline for a Brandon Sanderson style young adult fantasy book. I add the Brandon Sanderson because I just like his outlines. He's a great outliner. And I don't have as much of a ethical issue using styles like this when in the outlining phase. It's really only when we get to the prose. But that's another discussion. And then I'm going to go over here and take the synopsis that we've already established and paste the synopsis into this little section here, then move on. And then I'll say this: the outline should be structured in this format: Act 1, Introduction, Chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Rising Conflict, Chapter 7, Chapter 8, etc. Continue for up to 24 chapters and following the 3-act structure, and 6 chapters for Act 1, 12 chapters for Act 2, and 6 chapters for Act 3. I'm kind of following the 24-act structure here, or the 24-chapter outline here roughly. I could get into more detail on that. But it's important here, since we are intending to use this for Sudowrite, to give it this format, because in Sudowrite it tells you, if we go back to the outline here, that it needs to be in this particular format with Act 1 dash introduction. Actually, the word introduction can be anything, but it needs to be Act 1 dash something and then a colon, and then chapter 1, colon, chapter 2, colon, etc. It needs to be in that format for it to be able to properly understand things. Now, you could do that yourself, but it sometimes is simpler to just give that feedback to ChatGPT in the first place, so it will be using that format going forward. So let's see how this goes. All right, and it has given us an outline, and I gotta say right off the bat, this is so much better. So much better. For one, these chapter summaries are very brief, which is going to make it easier for you to add your own description to these chapter summaries. Plus, it also did a good job of keeping to the 3-act format with 6 chapters in Act 1, 12 chapters in Act 2, and 6 chapters in Act 3. It did that perfectly. We have a perfect 24 chapter outline here, which I was actually surprised it got right. And so I'm actually really pleased with this. It still has a lot of the same problems that we had before. For instance, like I was saying before, the first 3 chapters, I think I could really combine into one. I think that's still the case here. I think it's better to take these 3 chapters that it gave me and make this one chapter. So you want to really be figuring it out as you go, and don't don't skip over this step, is basically what I'm trying to say to you, because the more you can really get this right, the better your final output will be by a lot. So this is a really great start. I do think that doing this in ChatGPT was so much better than doing it within Sudowrite. So if you do it this way, you can save words. I was using GPT-4 for this, so if you don't have ChatGPT Plus, you can try it with ChatGPT 3.5, the free version, or you can try it with Claude, which is also currently free if you use Claude 2.0. Just give it a try, see what you can do, and then spend the time to make it work. And I'll see you in the next video.